Hey, Riddle here. I wanted to give an update and fill you in on a very long story about my journey with chronic fatigue and Lyme disease. So, about 6 years ago, we moved to Santa Cruz, California. That's very near the Silicon Valley. My spouse got a job with the Apple Corporation, and we moved from Los Angeles to Northern California. And I was excited. I was excited to potentially be around intellectuals and the smart people and have a beautiful lifestyle in the redwood forests and beaches. But what I wasn't prepared for was even having some of the best insurance in the country and support system through that insurance, having some of the worst medical care of my life. Just to warn you, before you move somewhere, it's really important to investigate the healthcare system, doctors and such, especially if you have a pre-existing condition of some sort that you're going to have to be monitored or what have you. So about 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I just started feeling wrong. And as you can tell, I take care of myself. I'm not the part of the 70% of Americans that are obese. I eat very well, exercise, and so on and so forth. But I started experiencing extreme brain fog to the point that some days I couldn't even string together a sentence, where I'm regularly a very confident and articulate individual. Muscle pain, strange aches and pains, and fatigue. And I don't mean being tired because, I overexerted myself. I mean the type of fatigue that you sleep 8 or 9 hours solid and you wake up tired. And it was making my life impossible. So I started going to specialists, rheumatologists, infectious disease doctors at Stanford, the Cadillac of hospitals. And even eventually was so desperate, I got into the Stanford Chronic Fatigue Clinic. And I started experimental stuff that I had to fight really hard to get access to, because there's no support from the medical community, because they're just basically so overworked and so practiced in the art of not getting sued, that they have this little tiny template. And if you do not fit in that little template of knowledge or care, you're screwed. And the Lyme disease issue is someday, very soon here, going to come out in a huge way. It's almost a conspiracy. And I say this because I am not a conspiracist, but not only do I have some of the best insurance in the country, and not only am I one of the upper demographics financially, but I also, through that insurance, have a team of advocates that can help me get access to help when I cannot seem to find those answers myself. And even with that team of professionals outside of the insurance system, they ran into the exact same brick walls getting help for my chronic Lyme disease as I did. So imagine you do not have great insurance. Imagine you're not, you don't have a lot of fight in you. Imagine you do not have these resources and you get Lyme disease. And over 250,000 people in the United States will get Lyme disease this year, and this will literally ruin their lives. It will make them unable to work. It will make them unable to function. It is a serious pandemic that the insurance companies and medical community have basically turned their backs on. Why? We don't know yet. It's just a fact. And at Stanford, well, it was just amazing. So first, this young doctor, she prescribes a medicine to me to help manage the pain from the Lyme arthritis, because at this point we didn't know it was Lyme disease. And she did not cross-reference to see my other medical conditions. And it put me in this horrific asthma episode, because this medicine is not supposed to be given to asthmatics. And then, of course, I had to have the common sense to stop taking the medication. And when I brought it to her attention, like most doctors, instead of apologizing and taking responsibility, she dismissed it as one of those things that just happens. Oh, nice. And like I said, I went to endless rheumatologists, and all these doctors would keep doing is saying, we can't find anything, and retesting me, and then send me to more rheumatologists. And a year ago, my symptoms became so out of control. This is before I was diagnosed with the Lyme disease just 3 months ago, that I was in the emergency room 3 days in a row with pain so bad I could not sleep at night. I developed Bell's palsy and half of my face was paralyzed. I had a catheter bag because I wasn't able to urinate, I wasn't able to defecate, which got so backed up in my system that I couldn't urinate. And these are all like the red flags, especially the Bell's palsy of Lyme disease. And here I am in front of numerous medical professionals, emergency room at Dominican Hospital in Santa Cruz, California, and the one next door. And not one person caught the obvious. Yet, and every time they would see these dramatic things, and they'd be like, oh, that's really weird. I mean, the lack of basic understanding of the local environment here, and that we have a huge population of ticks, and the Lyme disease population is enormous here. And I'm going to give you an example, because this is a truth. So I'm such a proactive person. I wanted to understand before I made this video, before I made these judgments. I called and I can't remember her name, but I called, because I usually forget the names of people that I find lacking professionalism or exceptionalism. I just don't have room in my brain to store that. The woman from the health department who handles the Lyme disease issue here in Santa Cruz County called me back, and she was incredibly placating. And as a matter of fact, tried to tell me that it was very rare here and a very low percentage. And shouldn't you just be happy that you know you have Lyme disease, sir? When in fact, on my street, there's only 7 houses. 3 of my neighbors have had Lyme disease. The dog on the property right next to me has Lyme disease right now. And anywhere in Santa Cruz, Scotts Valley, if you just stand there publicly, like when I'm in the pharmacy, and just bring it up, even the phlebotomist who took my blood for the useless rheumatologist, her husband had Lyme disease. So just talking publicly, you will always have someone around you in a small group of like 5 people. At least one of those people will either have had Lyme disease or know somebody whose life was ruined by Lyme disease. Yet the local government and the local medical community is acting and will treat you like it is an anomaly. And it is not an anomaly. It's not only a common thing and becoming a pandemic, it's also something that they no longer treat in this area at the level that it's supposed to be treated. Meaning, once I understood, because my spouse came home from volleyball, and there's a young woman there, and she was just talking about her symptoms and this Lyme disease thing. And my spouse said, "Hey, were you ever tested for that?" Seems like a no-brainer, considering I live in the redwood forest, and the doctors know I'm a hiker, a mushroom hunter, organic food farmer. I said, "I think so, but I don't know." And I reached out to the chronic fatigue clinic doctor and said, hey, this is your wheelhouse. Did you test me for Lyme disease? And reluctantly, she did it. And not only did I have Lyme disease, but when I finally found a doctor that would do what they will allow legally in regards to treating the Lyme disease, which is oral antibiotics, which can be incredibly ineffective, but I was taking what I could get at the time. He said the largest titer count or count of the bacteria in the body he had seen in the over 30 years he'd been treating Lyme disease was a 7, and mine happened to be an 8.1. It just so happened the day that I got those results, I also had an appointment with a rheumatologist in Santa Cruz at Dominican Hospital. And when I showed her these results, she, again, did not believe that I had Lyme disease and took the money from my insurance, ran all the tests, STD tests, all these tests, promised me she would help me if indeed it was Lyme disease. And then after the same test came back with the same results, she basically said, I don't treat Lyme disease, and shut the door. They didn't give me any options. They didn't give me any referrals. I mean, this is what medicine has become in Northern California, maybe the whole United States. This is just what I'm experiencing right now. And this is another thing that I experienced with every medical provider in the area, including Stanford. Even though I could not sleep at night, even though the level of my pain was so great, I was living in consistent agony and not being able to sleep at night, which is the first essential thing to, keeping yourself together mentally and physically and to heal. They literally would not give me anything and had no suggestions for help. I literally, about a month and a half ago, had to write these little psychotic 4-letter cursing in an email through the porthole to Stanford to my doctor, asking for at least a sleep aid, common sense, empathy. And after going psychotic, her nursing assistant reached out to me because they were getting worried. They were getting embarrassed because, when you communicate through that system, through the porthole, that can potentially be seen by management. And they were getting sick of me going crazy via porthole out of complete desperation. And yes, Lyme disease, the bacteria does get into your brain and can create mental health issues. And then the lack of sleep, of course. And so the nurse reached out to me in a very placating way, what could we do for, and I said, it's really simple, dude. Pretend you're me. Pretend you're in such pain that every day is agonizing. Pretend that you cannot sleep at night. What would you want? Common sense. So finally, the doctor at least gave me a sleeping aid, which helped enormously. But the things that I had to do to get just that's all that was offered to me. And my doctor at Stanford, she led me to believe, after I got the oral antibiotics, they said they didn't treat Lyme disease. And yet on their website, they have all this cutting edge research and this and that. But of course, we don't have access to that. It's just all pomp and circumstance, I guess. And she led me to believe that they were going to treat me because my doctor who gave me the oral antibiotics, who's just a family doctor, small town, local doctor, who was actually the most professional and the most compassionate, reached out to them for me, advocating angrily and said, help this guy. And then suddenly I got apologies, and then they said they treat Lyme disease. So I said to her before I drove there, because it's an hour and a half, 2 hours drive one way, I said, I want to know the plan of attack. I want to know you're actually going to do something for me for a change before I invest this time, money, energy. She agreed. And I get there for her to tell me they're not going to do anything for me. Yep. She's in the template. And even though, as articulate as I am, and the resources, and my obvious intelligence, she's going to dismiss me And she's going to tell me that the Lyme related arthritis is, of course and this is what Lyme disease people get. It's something else. It's all in your head. They're going to run 100 more tests to take more money from my insurance company, which are all going to come back fine, because they've ran these same tests before. They're going to put a focus on things that have nothing to do with helping me treating the Lyme disease. And she actually gave me an apology, oddly enough, telling me that I was in the perfect storm. Two perfect storms. The first perfect storm was the opioid crisis, which was their way of telling me they can't give me anything for the pain. The second perfect storm was the Lyme disease storm. And that is the storm where there is this huge disconnect between the reality of the amount of people who have Lyme disease and what they're experiencing in regards to symptoms, and the medical community's recognition and treatment of Lyme disease. So I get apologies, but that's all I get. So once again, they ran all the tests, all bullshit. Everything came back normal. She actually lied to me, said there was some issue. There's possibly a marker in the arthritis department, and set up a appointment for me to see this would be the third rheumatologist at Stanford. 4 months was as soon as they could see me. So here's this man suffering from pain so incredibly he can't sleep at night or function during the day, and I'm going to wait over 4 months for help. And so what I said to her was, okay, but what I want you to do, I'll play your game. I'll go along with you, doctor. But I need for you to tell me, to reach out to the rheumatologist and tell me, what are they going to do for me that all the other rheumatologists basically have told me there's nothing they can do for me? Did she do that? No. So I took those lab results and I went to my professional doctor, the little doctor, the elder in the local town, and I let him pull up the blood work and look at it. And my instincts were correct. He said, no, this does not substantiate that you have arthritis. This does not substantiate you seeing a rheumatologist. This is bullshit. So I was basically lied to by the Stanford doctor. I think they just try to distract you. I think it's a big money maker, of course. Cyclical. But also, I think it's to distract you and get you away from the focus being on them and their lack of ability, perhaps, due to the template they're stuck in to actually help you in any possible way. So now that I've told you this huge background of this story, I'm going to go to, because you may be suffering from Lyme disease, and this is the crazy thing with the oral antibiotics. Generally, they give you a 14-day course of doxycycline, which may be great if you caught the Lyme disease right away. So let's say you get bit, you have a ring around the big red ring around your bite, and you get to the hospital right away, or your doctor right away, and you're cool because you're in that window of time that the doxycycline, the antibiotic, can kill the bacteria. If you're not in that window, or if you didn't form a ring, so you don't even know you got bit, or you didn't go to the doctor because they tell you it has to form a ring, when actually the ring only happens 30% of the time. And that was my case. I get bit by ticks all the time. I mean, look where I live. And I'm an outdoorsman. But I just pull them off, and there was no ring. That's what I thought. I was safe. But the fact is the ring only forms 30% of the time. So you can still get the bacteria and now other infections from the ticks. And now the ticks are becoming higher populated and more prevalent. We've even locally, they have found hundreds and thousands of ticks waiting in the little scrub brush when you go to the ocean, and you have to walk through that little scrub brush area before you actually hit the sands on the beach. They're waiting, disease-filled ticks, and nobody knows. And the reason the ticks are becoming so pronounced, one of the reasons, and so highly populated, is that the it's not getting cold enough in the winters to kill them off. And because it's not getting cold enough in the winters to kill them off, they're not dying down. The populations aren't dying down. So it's a big problem. It's a big problem. And it's going to become a bigger problem for everybody because of this. So let's say you're in the position right now that I was a couple months ago, where you're helpless, you're hopeless, you're exhausted. What do? Nobody's giving you anything except bad advice. No one's giving you any help. What do? This is what I did. And I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you that this will work for you. But for me, it was either suicide or it was taking control of my life and taking action. And because that's how much pain I was in. That's how agonizing and hopeless I felt on a daily basis. So I went rogue. I was like, no one's going to help me. I have to help myself. So I got cannabis. I got magic mushrooms. I went to my friends and I said, hey, do you have any prescription drugs? Do you have any painkillers? Do you have anything to help me manage my pain and my symptoms on a daily basis? And luckily, my friends had, sleeping pills, pain pills, and the magic bullet, the silver bullet for me was Adderall. Because the thing is, so the problem is when they give you the 14-day oral antibiotics, because the bacteria is a spirochete, which means a spiral-shaped bacteria that can get through the blood-brain barrier and into the tissue. And it's one of the reasons it causes the arthritis, is because it gets into your joints and it leaves these crystalline deposits. If you do not get enough of the antibiotics for a long enough period of time, they repopulate and it comes back. And I've met numerous people who had the mild dose of antibiotics and a year later are now suffering from migraines, major fatigue, and all the same symptoms and worse, because now they have chronic Lyme disease because they were not given the proper treatment, which is a pretty precarious and an extensive dose of intravenous antibiotics. They used to do the intravenous antibiotic treatment in this area, which is really weird because the one of the rheumatologists I told you about that told me she couldn't help me used to do this treatment. And my little doctor, the local doctor I'm telling you about, who actually tried to help me, he used to do the treatment, but they won't let them do it anymore. And some local hikers who come to my property, because I have a big art display on my property and people hike here from all over to see it and to hang out in it. They said, oh, there's this rheumatologist who's really great at Dominican and she helped our friend. It was the same rheumatologist I went to, but suddenly she's not able to do the proper treatment anymore for people with chronic Lyme disease. So no one can explain to me why. Why suddenly has this option been erased from the treatment protocol for people with chronic Lyme disease? And again, so what my local doctor did is he tried to give me a quadruple dose of 2 antibiotics. And I'm slowly feeling incrementally better. The joint pain slowly going away. Of course, you can see my cognitive abilities are back 110%, but my fatigue is still an issue. The fatigue is still a big issue. So when my friend gave me some Adderall, which I took half of the dose, I take half of a 15 milligram tablet. That was the magic bullet for me for the days that I can't pull it together energy-wise. And when I went to visit and get a follow-up with the only doctor that I've trusted at this point, and the reason I trust him And it's funny, this is another terrifying part about this journey. Imagine you're supposed to be trusting these doctors and they're supposed to be helping you, and they're trying to discredit each other. So the Stanford people, because they're very anti-antibiotic, tried to tell me that I was given like, you know, a dangerous dose of antibiotics that would have been equivalent to the intravenous antibiotics. But I have to say, the doctor, the elderly doctor, the local doctor who did that for me, he double checked all of my pre-existing conditions, any other medications I was on prior to prescribing that medicine to me. Where at Stanford, they're just like, la, 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 and put my health at risk, which I told you about earlier in the video. So my advice to you, if you're suffering from chronic Lyme disease, is do what you have to do to get through. That means diet, exercise. I find cutting back on wheat and carbohydrates has a dramatic effect on lowering the inflammation in my joints. And if you need to get some weed or something else to help, microdosing to help you get through this and to keep your sanity and keep your job. And that's what these doctors don't understand too. Not one of them asked me like, oh, you know, how are you working? Like, how are you getting through? Like, what do you do for a living? It's like they don't treat you or see you as an equal or a human. They see you, you're just an object. You're an object. It's like chattel. You know, it's shocking, the lack of common sense and empathy. And even at a Cadillac of so-called research hospital like Stanford. So I am sorry, I'm going to say this to you, my fellow Lyme disease sufferers. If you are going through this and you feel abandoned and misunderstood, because you are being abandoned and misunderstood. And I have a feeling that very, very soon the lid's going to be blown off this thing, and the medical community is going to be forced to do the right thing. But right now, there is some weird shit going down, and we're on our own. We're on our own. So my game plan, I met with the doctor who actually tried to help me. And even though I feel like I'm incrementally every day feeling a little bit better, we have a game plan, and that is in 6 months, if I am not, if I feel like I'm going backwards in regards to the symptoms, we are going to retest regardless to see if the bacteria has repopulated in my body because it's hiding, you know, in my brain or in my joints or in my spinal fluid. Oh, and Stanford said that couldn't be done, by the way. That can't be done. There's no way of telling. Liars. So we're going to do that. And then if in fact it is repopulating in me, and the oral antibiotics, even at the heavy dose that were administered to me, I'm going to have to find somewhere, go outside of the state of California and find treatment and probably pay out of pocket for that. Shocking, right? When the problem is right in our own backyard. And it's like I live in one of the most expensive places in the country to live. The cost of living here is astronomical, and the healthcare is horrific. Warning. Warning. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess. So do what you have to do to get through. Do what you have to do to get through, because it's the only way you're going to survive this. It's the only way you're going to thrive through it. There's just not a lot of help out there. And right now, the disconnect between the reality of Lyme disease and the symptoms and the long-term suffering that comes along with it, and the medical community and their willingness, knowledge, and follow through is just, the disconnect is so huge that it's insane. It's literally insane. And this isn't just me saying that. This is me working with advocates who have tried to find care for me, who have tried to find answers for me. And these are people in the medical profession that are employed to help me find resources, and they couldn't even help me find resources. Strange and unexplainable. All right, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I hope all this made sense. It's such a big story, and I've tried to give you all the details in a fair and logical way. Bye.